the budget that we all vote on. And the person that runs around this building every day and seeing what people are doing, they're all flat out, and that's my concern. Are there any other comments?
Well, we had Mr. Solano serve on this commission, on this subcommittee, and I'd like to hear your comments in regards to Mr. Nickerson's comments.
So I think our policy right now, we are doing most of this, as you said. I think Mr. Nickerson's concern is the thresholds, if I'm not mistaken, is that correct?
Yes.
So that's being dictated to us, we believe, by the state. And from what I hear from a few attorneys that were on the subcommittee is we can't really get around that. So I think it's worth giving this a try for a year, seeing how it goes. I understand your concern, but I think there's a lot of good stuff in here. I think we have waiver provisions in here. Gives the Board of Selectmen and the first Selectman opportunities to waive it. And I know that's not something we want to do regularly, but we have that in here if we have a $26,000 bid. I think it's good to get this documented.
Could we approve this for a set period of time to go through the next budget cycle and see how this works? So, and then bring it back for final approval? Could we set this up as a, what do I say, like a trial period, temporary procedure, or?
Well, what we could do is I could, if that's what we do, we could amend the motion to give a date, through a certain date. We could do through September 30th of 2000, whatever next year, 18, 19.
Well, policy is policy, and we can always change our policy. We could just amend our policy without public hearing. It's not part of how we approve a policy, and it's not an ordinance. It doesn't, it doesn't have to go in the newspaper or anything like that. So we can approve this and then amend it if necessary. If I feel like the noose is getting too tight around the neck, and I'm at that point where I'm saying, see, here it is, then we can vote to change it. I got some opinion from our town attorney that said, you be careful of making exceptions.
Yeah.
I left one of our committee meetings with the department heads, and I kind of left thinking, well, I have this exception thing in my pocket. I can just take it out any time, and we can get good bids, good competitive bids, but not go to the whole process of sealed bids and publishing and all that. And the attorney's like, no, you do it once, you've set a precedent, and you've also boxed other people out. And if you have a policy, you need to stick to it. Unless it's an emergency, unless it's extenuating circumstances, unless it's, state bid and all that other thing. But we should not be, this first selectman, whoever's sitting in the seat, should not be giving out exceptions. It should not, even though our policy says so. He's very concerned about the precedent and therefore, possible liability actions to the town.
I understand what you're saying there too, because there's some obvious, but an exception is something that you'd have to grant so rarely that I would think that would fit that emergency.
If it's an emergency,
For instance,
yeah.
We have something collapse, a catastrophic failure of an HVAC system that has to be replaced immediately. I mean, that's easy, but there's a lot where, the person's here, he's got the equipment on site, it makes sense, let's do it. Well, I understand
Right.
granting an exception, you do start treading onto some tough area.
Did the town attorney give an opinion of the $25,000 in the state?
He did not review this in its entirety. If he did, he didn't. We didn't review it. We didn't send it to the attorney for his review. Never once did we, and maybe we should have. He just listen, the committee did a good job. We're allowed to make policy. We can do that. We're not stepping on legal landmines here, but he does suggest that the first selectman shouldn't exercise his exceptions, except in emergency situations.
Well, I'm uncomfortable with this at this point regarding your concerns, Mr. Nickerson, because you are the person who has to represent us before the Board of Finance. And if you have concerns about this policy and this presents difficulties, then I think that we should not vote on this tonight. And particularly, town attorney generally does review
Yeah.
policies of this nature, and I think that the concerns that are being raised should be brought to the town attorney. That's why we have him, for advice. And I think
All right,
this document, in the detail that it has, I believe, falls in the category of a legal document. And if he has not fully reviewed this and its provisions, and we have some concerns, then I do not think that this should be voted on tonight. I'd ask Mr. Siri to withdraw his motion, and the seconder.
Seeing as Mrs. Hardy and Mr. Nickerson both have reservations, I'm comfortable of withdrawing my motion.
I'll send it to attorney and have him report at their next meeting.
Well, we may need to hear from the seconder.
I'll withdraw, but I do want to hear from the attorney, and I specifically want to hear what his opinion is on the $25,000 and the argument that, about the state
Yeah.
dictating that. And could we go to 50,000? What would be the negative to that?
Yeah.
Are we setting ourselves up for?
That's right.
And additionally, if we did go do it at the 25,000 for a trial period before we change the policy, what grounds do we have to stand on to say we're complying with the state regulations and now we don't want to
Right.
because of the additional costs? There's no doubt the additional steps and requirements here adds additional checks and balances to the methodology by which you try to attempt to get the lowest bid. But that doesn't come free. It takes time and effort, whether it's by staff, whether it's by hiring someone to write the request for proposal for you, or depending on the subject matter. But the intent is to have that checks and balance, I believe. It's a question of, is it warranted? And the
Yeah.
non-compliance with the state statutes, I think is definitely something we should get a legal opinion on.
Let's send this to the attorney. I'll check on that, because I had some differing opinions on the 25K, the mandated 25K. Again, one of those unfunded mandates. Okay, if we get stuck with 25K, it's another cost to 169 towns in the state of Connecticut that increase our cost of doing business. And if that's the case, that's the case. So let me send it out to the town attorney. I apologize that we probably should have just thought of that earlier.
Can
But
I
he
ask
did.
one more thing, Mark?
Yeah.
Maybe from Anna, could we get, we had it, but it's old information now, the number of bids that are above $25,000 per year that this town will be putting out, so we can get a number of how many?
Number of jobs?
Number of jobs that would fall under this category of over 25,000 that would have to go out to bid, particularly between 25,000 and 50. That'd be useful to know. I had it before, but it was dated, and that's over a year now.
Yeah, okay. What did you have? Do you remember?
I don't have those numbers with me, but I had it we did have a breakdown.
Yeah.
Because initially we were going to set it based on a certain, pick a number of times we want to go out to bid, and then we could set it that way. But we backed off it once we had the state
Okay.
number
We'll
of
get some
25,000.
information for you.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on. Any other comments?
I agree.
Oh.
I think, since you have concerns, I think they need to be addressed, and let's find out. Let's get another look at it, and I think that's a wise decision. We don't have to do this tonight.
That's right. Okay, then we'll move on our agenda too, and we'll get some more background for our policy. And I do appreciate all the work that the committee had put in. Great work and great thought. And I'm just concerned about the operation of the town and the costs of doing business. and staying as efficient and lean as possible. Moving on, to review the harbor management ordinance. I know one fellow's here for it, and I don't know if the communication went to the Board of Selectmen, but the attorneys in the harbor management committee is still working on language, and they haven't gotten it together yet, so we're not hearing that tonight. The attorneys are still working on some issues, some sticky points, so there was the fellow that the Harbor Management Committee hired that spoke a couple meetings ago, or at least over a month ago, and our attorney, and they're still trying to meet in the middle, so that will be continued.
So we're not gonna discuss this at all?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It's not, we're not prepared to push it to a public hearing yet. And we'll have a public hearing on this ordinance and the plan itself coming up in the future. For new business, we need
Well,
to.
wait a minute, as
Yes, ma'am.
we're going to delay this.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if anyone else on the board has any concerns about this that we should forward to you, or whomever,
Sure.
so that they would be
abs-
considered.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might be wise.
Do you want to put them in the minutes, or would you like to forward them to me?
Um,
What would be
I
most
would just,
efficient?
I don't have any specific ones, but as long as we're going to put it on delay, I would like to go back and review it a second time.
Okay.
And I would be happy to send any of those concerns to your office.
Yeah, were you present when Attorney Collins is here?
I was not.
Okay, and she found some issues with how that ordinance is written, and that's why everything just grinded to a halt, because it really doesn't fit into our ordinance book the way their outside counsel wrote it. So they're getting it together. She had some concerns that are probably similar to yours, since you probably taught her much of our ordinance book. If anyone has any concerns, do you want to forward them to me so that we can do this once?
Right.
Forward them to Sandy, and Sandy will communicate that to Tracy, to Mr. Attorney Collins. Appoint the attorney William Willits Jr. to examine the indices.
Move to appoint Attorney William Willits Jr. to examine the indices of the land records for calendar year 2018 in accordance with Connecticut General Statute, Section 7-14, for the sum of $2,000, and with a thank you for over 30 years of service.
Second.
And a very, very affordable price, and we appreciate that as well. Good service to the town. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? We have appropriations tonight. The allocation of funds for the SPED lawsuit. Is that something you want to speak to, Mr. Newton? Is that something that Mrs. Johnson's going to speak to, or is that something you'd like me to speak to? There are some special education lawsuits, or a particular lawsuit pending, and we've been told to expect a decision, and you've been saving money.
Exactly. We've been
in
working
your budget.
towards.
It's been in your budget.
Yes, and we are close to a settlement. This is something that has been going on for a number of years. We're closing in on that, and we've been working over the last 2 years to capture some of those dollars to help support what that final agreement will be. So I don't want to get into too much detail in
Of
open
course
session,
not.
but
So there's $543,778 available to mitigate the exposure in adverse judgment, should that occur, that you've been putting in your budget and tucking away. But what we'd like to do is commit that $193,778 remaining from the Board of Education 16-17 budget, and $350,000 from the current last year 17-18 budget,
Yes.
for a total of $543,778 in fund balance specifically for the payment of the judgment of a pending litigation matter once it's finalized. So in other words, Ms. Johnson, are we setting up like a CNRE or a special account where this money will go?
We're
committed fund balance. Can't be spent on anything else. This is for litigation of pending lawsuits or suit. And it gets moved away, and it gets specifically designated for that purpose, rather than floating it in an account. Great.
Yeah.
Any questions? And again, of course, we can't get into specifics until it becomes public
And,
record.
you know, we can't get into specifics about negotiations or what the final settlement may be, but there is some risk that this may not be the full amount pending what the final outcome is. And we'd have to address that at that time. Correct?
Yes, correct.
Could be higher, could be lower.
Correct.
Yes.
I'll move to commit $193,778 remaining from the Board of Education 2016-17 budget and $350,000 from the 2017-18 budget for a total amount of $543,778 in fund balance, specifically for the payment of a judgment in a pending litigation matter once it is finalized by the court and forwarded to the Board of Finance for approval.
Second.
Any comments? I think this is a wise, prudent move. I'm glad we're doing this in this way, and thank you for having such, control on budgetary matters out there, and looking forward to making sure we can settle this.
We can partially thank our governor for a holdback this past year as well, as this is where much of this money was
Yeah,
captured.
the frozen funds.
Yes.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Abstain?
Terrific. Number 2 is the establishment of the CNRE East Lyme High School Turf Fields Fund. When we built the turf field, part of the public, part of the communication to the public, to this board, to the Board of Finance, to the public at large, was that we would commit funds, maybe through advertising, maybe through fundraising, and maybe through other sources, to set aside money year by year. So then when that turf field did need to be replaced after 20 years or so, that there might be maybe all the money, and if not, at least partial funds available to replace that field. It was thought that we'd be able to do a lot of advertising, and that program never really has taken off. But there's a call, especially from the Board of Finance, to do something and to start putting something away. We're about 8 years into our turf field, and so we still have
Yes, I think
maybe
it's
4 or 5.
Oh, no.
2014 was the first year it was used, so.
Okay, so it must have been right before I came into district,
Yeah.
because it was there when I arrived,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
This is 4 younger.
So we have more than a dozen years left, and what we're doing is establishing a CNRE account. Well, we have the CNRE Fund 32 account, and we want to create a category for this specific purpose, and the board has $25,000 from its last year's budget due to the frozen funding, and we'll be placing that in there, $25,000.
Yes,
And then a goal
to start.
Yeah, and then
And
a
then
goal of putting
up to
some money
20.
in your budget or finding advertising or other
Exactly.
funding
We're
resources.
going to still work on the advertiser, trying to come up with, many different scenarios. So we thought a reasonable number, after talking with the Board of Ed, might be up to $20,000 to generate enough dollars as we move forward over the next 10 to 12 years to help offset the cost of a full field replacement, as it's been requested by the Board of Finance.
Mr. Newton, do you know of other area high schools that are raising their own funds? I mean, this is going to be how much would it be to replace that turf field? You chaired that committee. And
I was involved. Right now, in dollars for just the turf, which is all we'd have to do, there's a lot we don't have to do anymore because of, it took
right.
It would roughly be about $450,000 in 2014 dollars.
So-
Move ahead about 14 years, they figure that'd be about $700,000.
$600,000 or $700,000. Are there other area high schools, and certainly in our DERG or in our area, that are out there with huge advertising programs that could raise that kind of money over the course of a dozen years?
Not to my knowledge, no.
All right.
No.
Are there any successful advertising programs out there?
Not pertaining
That you're
to
hearing about?
advertising, from what the research that we've gathered and done, and speak specifically, Waterford, for instance, puts money into their capital plan each year, and that adds up.
Right.
And that covers the full cost of the replacement years down the road,
Which is what we're,
which is what we're trying to
Suggesting.
kind of
Yeah.
establish and do, through the
Yeah.
CNRE.
right. And you could have a line item in your budget, I suppose, that said,
We talked a little bit about that at the board
$50,000
level.
for the capital.
Exactly, as a
Yeah.
possibility, but we wanted to at least get things started
Yeah.
and start trying to put away some
Okay.
dollars to help offset that cost down
Okay.
the road.
And are there any, following that, are there any programs that people pay to rent the field, or is it all nonprofits?
No, there is. There are some that pay to rent the field and some nonprofits, but much of the time is, I'd say 98% of the time is gobbled up by both our sports teams and Park and Rec teams as well, because Park and Rec, we share back and forth, so we don't charge Park and Rec for any usage. It's been a long-standing partnership. It's worked great for multiple years, so it limits the amount of time that we can rent that field out to outside folks at a cost. So same thing with our interior, our basketball, our gyms, areas of that nature. Same thing, Park and Rec uses a good percentage of those spaces. So it makes it very difficult for us to generate a lot of revenue dollars to support things of this nature.
That's a good point.
Mark, a few years ago, I did a summer lacrosse men's league to where you really can't raise, if you charge the amount which you really need to do to raise some revenue in addition to what the cost is, because we did have to pay for the cost of lights. And I think for having someone at the facility. And you really just can't raise the revenue, because if you raise it too high, no one's going to come.
You'll scare
You'll
them
say,
off.
okay, and it was well attended. I didn't do it the following year because I'm tired. But
Wait, you played lacrosse?
no, I did not. I
Okay.
ran the summer one for a summer. No,
Just wanted to be clear.
no, there was a
For the
Kevin
record.
Terry that played lacrosse, but it was my son, not me.
Good
Okay.
to straighten that out.
So,
Oh, my gosh.
So-
Do we have a
Them
motion
doing
on the
this.
floor?
no, we don't.
No, we don't.
All right, can I ask,
Yeah.
what is the,
We don't have a motion on the floor.
Okay, I'll move to approve a special appropriation to CNRE Fund 32 with remaining funds available from the Board of Education 2017-18 General Fund Budget in the amount of $25,000 and establish an account titled East Lyme High School Turf Field Replacement and forward to the Board of Finance for approval, and a town meeting is needed.
Second.
Mr. Cunningham?
I'm just curious, so when was it installed? How long ago was it?
To my knowledge, I've been here 4 years now, so 5 or 6 years. Kevin, is it?
2014.
2014.
14 was the first year it was used. It was
Okay.
installed the 13 into
All right.
14.
All right. And what's the
So-
projected life of a field like that typically?
About 14 to 15 years,
Okay.
roughly. We try and put a lot of time and energy into maintaining it
Yeah.
to keep its life
Yeah.
maybe a little bit longer, but that's the projected lifespan.
Okay. Thank you.
In this field, like other fields on Board of Ed property, we do not, in addition to Parks and Rec, we don't charge any of the civic youth leagues for use of the fields, outside of lighting, correct?
If they're like travel teams, and I guess I'm speaking more to the gymnasiums for like a lot of basketball travel teams, there aren't any real travel football teams or.
Well, like the Little League fields,
No, we don't really have any.
the youth football field down at the middle school.
Those,
the
no,
Little
those
Leagues,
are,
no?
those are
No.
town, yeah, those are town fields.
Town leagues
Town,
that are used for
yes,
town residents.
exactly. But, we use Brybrook. It's that partnership
Yep.
where many of
Vets.
our sports teams, our
Use
girls
vets,
soccer team
yeah.
practices
Yeah.
at Brybrook every practice,
Right.
so.
Has there been any money raised at all? Is there any money in the account from any fundraising that's been done?
Approximately $4,000,
About 4,000.
yes.
From fundraising activity?
From
or use-
fundraising activities, from when that discussion had taken place back maybe 5 or 6 years ago, when they were talking about putting the field in. That's what has been raised. We just found it very challenging, and frankly, it hasn't been. Marketing and fundraising is not something that has been our focus as of right now. As we move forward, it's something we might continue to look at, but it just we don't have the opportunities to be able to really do so in a great, strong manner.
Well, I would be more enthusiastic about this proposal if there was some effort made on the part of the stakeholders and the users to do some fundraising and assist. But this was very clearly the promise that was made to this board and the Board of Finance, and I realize that you were not here at that time, but it was very clear that that was part of the agreement. And I think that there has been little effort towards that. Now, admittedly, we don't ask other groups to go out and raise money, but that was part of how it was presented very enthusiastically by the supporters who wanted this. And I don't feel that they have risen to meet the commitment that they made. So if there was some caveat in here that this would be supplemented by fundraising efforts for the groups involved, the Boosters Club or whatever, I would be more enthusiastic about it. But there's been a lot of talk about this presentation of the Miracle League and the Miracle Field, and they don't seem to have had much difficulty raising funds for that particular field. So I just don't see the effort being made that was promised to us.
Yeah, I know, Roseanne, I can't speak to what, we went back, actually one of our board members went back and pulled all the minutes from those meetings. There's nothing in there that states, the Board of Ed was going to commit to, fundraising and raising money. I know it was discussed. We don't have, and there's varying opinions and views across our board as to, it's a town field. Many people use it outside of school or park and rec that are there on a Saturday or Sunday that we have no control over, and it should be a capital item that is covered down the road. I think it's a partnership. I think we've got to make some effort, and this is what we're starting to do. We don't have a specific person in our district dedicated to marketing. If I had on my budget and the ability to hire somebody to do that and was dedicated to that, maybe we could make some strides, but we don't have that right now, unfortunately. So it's challenging because that's a job in itself, going after grants, going after marketing components. But we're making an attempt. We're starting.
Could I follow up on that?
Yes, go ahead, and then I'll come back.
Okay, the fees that are charged for football games and such, does that all go toward the sports teams, or does some of it retained by the Board of Ed to pay for lights and stuff like that?
Not lights, but it goes to field. You've got to replace the pellets on the field, all little granular pellets.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
So there's field upkeep, paying of all the referees through the CIAC. So most of those dollars go towards those items.
Operational costs, please.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Operational costs of all the field, baseball field, all of the grass and replacement and seed and et cetera, because that's not a turf field.
Oh.
So,
I wasn't directly involved, but there was several years before it became a groundswell activity to come up and get this field approved. And it's either gonna be upon the town to pay $700,000, or it's gonna take a groundswell to try and cut that burden to the town considerably. And it shouldn't just be the Board of Education, it should be, Parks and Rec, whoever's using that field, should be able to stand up and help contribute to its longevity. The other option is it's all capital investment, like fixing the floors in the gyms are all CRE accounts that aren't charged. So it's what was discussed, vice what was committed. So there's options of what can be done to cover that $700,000 cost.